The Galactic Academy of Higher Learning prided itself on being the most prestigious educational institution in 7-star systems. Its architecture was a marvel of crystalline spires and gravity-defying arches that shimmered with bioluminescent algae. Holographic banners displaying the school motto "Knowledge Transcends Species" floated above the quad, where hundreds of students from dozens of worlds mingled between classes. And then there was Zara Novak, the only human on campus, currently sprinting across that quad and leaving a trail of horrified aliens in her wake. "Sorry. Coming through. Move your tentacles or lose your tentacles," Zara shouted, dodging a cluster of gelatinous Murbexians who quivered in distress as she passed. She wasn't technically late yet, but Professor Narlax had 8 eyes and seemed to use all of them to track tardiness with obsessive precision. The thing about being the only representative of your species in an interplanetary exchange program was that you couldn't exactly blend in. At 5'7" with brown skin, dark curly hair, and the standard issue 2 arms and 2 legs, Zara was downright boring by Earth standards. Here at the Academy, she might as well have been wearing a neon sign that flashed Deathworlder in pulsating letters. "There goes the human," whispered a floating cloud of sentient gas to its companion. "I heard they sleep for 8 hours every cycle, like completely unconscious. Predators could just eat them." "I heard they deliberately ingest acidic substances for pleasure," responded its friend, tendrils of vapor curling in obvious disgust. Zara pretended not to hear these comments as she slipped through the molecular membrane that served as the doorway to advanced xenobiology. She'd gotten used to being the subject of rumors and whispered speculation during her 3 months at the Academy. Humans were still relatively new to the Galactic Confederation, and Earth's classification as a Class-12 Deathworld made its inhabitants objects of both fear and fascination. Professor Narlax, a spindly insectoid whose exoskeleton gleamed with iridescent scholarly markings, paused mid-sentence as Zara found her adaptive seat. Student Novak joins us with 17 micronits to spare," the professor clicked, mandibles twitching with what Zara had learned to recognize as amusement. "We were just discussing this cycle's presentation assignment." The word presentation sent a chill down Zara's spine that had nothing to do with the classroom's methane-optimized temperature settings. Public speaking wasn't her forte even back on Earth. Here, with classmates who sometimes interpreted her involuntary biological functions as aggressive displays, it was a minefield. "Each student will prepare a comprehensive overview of an average day on their homeworld," Professor Narlax continued, compound eyes sweeping the room. "This assignment will help us understand the diverse environments that shaped our various evolutionary paths." A tentacled Ventosian in the front row raised 3 appendages simultaneously. "Professor, what parameters should we use to define average?" "Excellent question, Student Thrix. I'm looking for a typical cycle that demonstrates the routine challenges and activities your species encounters. Nothing extraordinary, just the mundane realities of existence on your world." The mundane realities of Earth. Zara suppressed a laugh. Back home, she was just an ordinary college student. Here she was treated like some kind of super soldier just for surviving what, to her, were perfectly normal conditions. As class ended, a holographic schedule materialized in front of each student, displaying presentation dates. Zara's name pulsed at the top of the list. "Of course I'm first," she muttered, gathering her adaptive data tablet. "The class is most eager to learn about Earth," Professor Narlax said, suddenly beside her with that unsettling silent movement his species was known for. "Your homeworld remains something of a mystery to many. Some of my colleagues still believe the reports about Earth are exaggerated for dramatic effect." "They're really not," Zara replied. "Precisely why your perspective is so valuable. The first-hand account of daily life from a Deathworlder will be most illuminating." As she left the classroom to scattered whispers of toxic atmosphere and crushing gravity well, Zara realized that the mundane details of her life on Earth might not be so mundane to her audience after all. She had exactly 1 day to prepare a presentation that would either fascinate her classmates or traumatize them for life. Knowing her luck, probably both. The Academy's library was a marvel of neural interface technology that could download information directly into most species' brains. For Zara, who lacked the necessary telepathic receptors, there was a small, dusty corner with actual physical data tablets, the xenobiology equivalent of a large print section for the visually impaired. "Hey, Deathworlder. Preparing for tomorrow?" Zara looked up to see Velon hovering nearby. His amorphous methane-based body contained within a specialized environmental suit that prevented him from dissipating in the oxygen-rich common areas. Despite his lack of facial features, she'd learned to detect his moods from subtle color changes in his gaseous form. Right now, he was a curious yellow-green. "Trying to," she sighed. "How do you explain morning rush hour to beings who've never experienced traffic? Is that some kind of human mating ritual?" Velon bubbled, his translator adding a synthetic chuckle. "God, no, it's never mind. You'll see tomorrow." She returned to scrolling through images of Earth she'd brought along. Everything looked so normal to her: streets, buildings, parks. Would any of it make sense to her classmates? A crystalline chiming announced the arrival of Kipti, whose silicon-based body refracted light into dazzling patterns across the library walls. Several nearby students grumbled about the distraction, but librarians couldn't exactly ask a student to stop existing so dramatically. "Zara, I brought you nutrition." Kipti's voice resonated from their crystalline structure, producing harmonies that made human speech sound flat by comparison. They set down a container of what the Academy food synthesizers had determined was compatible with human biochemistry. It looked like blue pudding and tasted vaguely of bananas and copper. "Thanks, Kipti. Have you finished your presentation yet?" The crystalline being vibrated with pride, creating a pleasant tinkling sound. "I have prepared a multi-sensory experience documenting the silicon refinement ceremonies of my birth cluster. There will be harmonics only perceivable through direct bone conduction, and prismatic displays showcasing the 7 sacred angles of perfection." Zara nodded politely, while spooning the blue goop into her mouth. Kipti's homeworld presentation would undoubtedly be beautiful and incomprehensible, like most of their contributions to class. "What about you, Velon?" The gaseous being pulsed a deep purple. "I've programmed the classroom environment to safely experience the methane storms of my atmospheric layer. You'll all need protective suits, of course, but it will be quite stimulating." "Great." Kipti would deliver an artistic masterpiece, Velon would create an immersive meteorological experience, and Zara would what? Show them how humans brush their teeth? Her anxiety must have been obvious because Kipti's crystalline structure dimmed sympathetically. "You seem distressed, Zara. Is your presentation not progressing well?" "I'm just not sure how to make Earth seem interesting without exaggerating. Everyone already thinks humans are either terrifying super predators or primitive savages who somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel. Why not simply tell the truth?" Velon suggested, his gaseous form swirling thoughtfully. "The unembellished reality of human existence is sufficiently alien to be fascinating." Kipti chimed in agreement. Indeed, Professor Narlax values authenticity above spectacle. Zara considered this. Maybe they were right. Maybe the most straightforward approach was best. She wouldn't need elaborate holograms or sensory simulations, just the honest account of a typical day on Earth. "You know what? You're right. I'll just tell them about an average Tuesday in my life." She closed her data tablet with new determination. No embellishments needed. As she headed back to her quarters to finalize her notes, Zara passed a group of students from a low-gravity moon who were practicing their levitation techniques for their presentation. Another student, whose species communicated primarily through bioluminescence, was rehearsing a light show so complex it made Zara slightly dizzy. Despite her friend's encouragement, doubt crept back in. Would a simple verbal description of Earth really stand up against these elaborate demonstrations? Would anyone even believe her when she described the basic facts of human existence? Tomorrow would certainly be interesting one way or another. The presentation hall adjusted itself as each student entered, shifting its environmental parameters to accommodate the diverse needs of the class. For Zara, this meant a slight increase in temperature and gravity compared to the Academy standard settings, though still far below Earth normal. She'd grown accustomed to feeling slightly buoyant all the time, as if she were walking in a swimming pool. Professor Narlax's exoskeleton gleamed under the adaptive lighting as he addressed the class. Today begins our exploration of homeworld environments with student Novak's presentation on Earth at Class-12 Deathworld that has recently joined our confederation. I remind everyone that reactions should be respectful, regardless of how unusual you may find the information. Zara took a deep breath and stepped onto the presentation platform. The subtle hum of translator modules adjusting to her speech patterns filled the brief silence. "Good morning, or whatever constitutes morning in your circadian rhythm," she began, forcing a smile. "I'm going to walk you through what would be a completely average day for me back on Earth." She activated her data tablet, projecting an image of a standard digital alarm clock displaying 6:30 a.m. The numbers glowed an innocent red against the black background. Most humans begin their day by being jolted awake by an alarm like this one, which emits a loud, repetitive sound to force us out of our unconscious state. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Kipti's crystalline form vibrated in distress, creating a discordant chiming. "You deliberately subject yourselves to sonic assault to begin each day?" Professor Narlax clicked. All 8 eyes widened. "Well, I wouldn't call it an assault exactly. Student Thrix's species experiences sound as physical pressure," the professor explained. "What you're describing would be equivalent to being repeatedly struck." "Oh, Zara hadn't considered that. Sorry, Thrix. But yes, we use sound to wake ourselves because humans are, remarkably unresponsive during our sleep cycle." "The vulnerability of this sleep still astounds me," muttered a student whose species experienced consciousness as a collective hive mind. 8 hours of complete helplessness each cycle. Zara moved on quickly. "After waking up, I would typically open my window to let in fresh air and sunlight." She displayed an image of a bedroom window with sunlight streaming through it. "Your species voluntarily exposes itself to unfiltered stellar radiation?" Professor Narlax's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Zara recognized as his equivalent of a shocked expression. "Well, yes. Our skin can handle some sun exposure. It's actually healthy for us, and small doses helps us produce vitamin D. Your biology requires you to absorb radiation to function correctly?" asked a fungoid student whose species lived primarily underground. Fascinating adaptation for a carbon-based life form. This was going to be a longer presentation than she'd anticipated if every mundane detail required explanation. "Next, I would go to my bathroom, a specialized room for hygienic purposes, and brush my teeth using a plastic implement and chemical paste." She displayed an image of a toothbrush and toothpaste. "You scrub your mouth bones? With chemicals?" Velen's gaseous form swirled in confusion. "They're not exactly bones, they're teeth, and yes, we need to clean them regularly, or they can decay and cause pain." The class took a moment to process this information, many students exchanging glances that Zara interpreted as, "Are humans actually real?" "After personal hygiene, I would typically consume my first meal of the day, often accompanied by coffee." The image of a simple breakfast with a steaming mug appeared on the display. Coffee is a beverage made from ground beans that contains a mild neurotoxin called caffeine, which stimulates our central nervous system and helps us function more alertly. "You intentionally consume neurotoxins with your morning nutrition?" Professor Narlax's exoskeleton paled slightly. "It's perfectly safe for humans," Zara assured him. "In fact, many of us can't properly function without it." "Dependency on a neurotoxin," murmured the professor, making notes on his own tablet. "Remarkable adaptation to a hostile evolutionary environment." Zara continued, describing her commute to university. The image of a typical city street during rush hour appeared, cars bumper to bumper, pedestrians hurrying along sidewalks, the morning sun reflecting off buildings. Most humans travel in individual transport vehicles powered by combustion engines or use larger communal transport systems. Either way, we spend significant time each day traveling through variable weather conditions to reach our destinations. A student whose species had evolved in the calm underwater environments of a moon entirely covered by ocean raised a fin. "You travel exposed to atmospheric disturbances? Without protective enclosures?" "Well, our vehicles provide some protection, but yes, we're exposed to weather when walking between buildings or waiting for transportation. And these weather conditions, They include precipitation, temperature fluctuations? Professor Narlax asked. Of course. Rain, snow, heat waves, cold snaps, depends on the season and region. The professor's note-taking became more vigorous. And humans simply endure these conditions? We wear different clothing depending on the weather, but otherwise, yes. Zara was starting to realize that what she considered utterly unremarkable about Earth was, to her audience, increasingly horrifying. So to summarize the beginning of a typical Earth day, Professor Narlax said, mandibles twitching, humans are forcibly awakened from a vulnerable unconscious state, expose themselves to stellar radiation. They scrub their mouth parts with chemicals, consume neurotoxins for improved cognitive function, and then travel through unpredictable atmospheric conditions to reach their daily activities. That about covers the first hour of the day, yes, Zara confirmed. The stunned silence that followed suggested her classmates might need a moment before she continued with the rest of her typical Earth day. After a brief recess where several students required calming pheromones from the Academy's medical staff, the class reconvened for the continuation of Zara's presentation. Professor Narlax had recruited a xenobiologist colleague to attend, presumably to verify Zara's claims about human resilience. Let's continue with what happens after I arrive at my education center, Zara said brightly, trying to inject some normalcy into what had become an increasingly tense atmosphere. She displayed images of a university campus with students walking between buildings. Most humans spend their days in climate-controlled structures, though the control is fairly minimal by your standards, usually just keeping temperatures within a 20-degree range and maintaining standard atmospheric pressure. Only 20 degrees, whispered a temperature-sensitive Caloxian, their heat-dispersing fins unfurling in distress. How do you survive such wild fluctuations? Our bodies regulate temperature internally, Zara explained. We generate heat when cold and release it when hot, through a process called sweating. You secrete bodily fluids to cool yourselves? The xenobiologist leaned forward, interest piqued. Fascinating thermoregulation method. Moving on, Zara continued hastily. A typical day includes multiple classes or work periods, with brief breaks for additional meals. We usually eat 3 times daily, though some humans prefer smaller, more frequent meals. And these meals, Professor Narlax inquired delicately, they consist of? Oh, a mix of things. Plants, fruits, grains. Some humans eat animal products or meat. The room fell silent. When you say meat, a herbivorous Pranix asked hesitantly, you mean synthesized protein structures? Sometimes. But traditionally meat comes from animals that are raised and then, well, consumed. Several students edged away from Zara's presentation platform. It's not like we're eating sentient species, she clarified quickly. Just non-sapient animals. And many humans are vegetarians who don't eat any animal products at all. This seemed to calm the class marginally, though the xenobiologist was furiously recording notes. Now, for transportation between locations, many humans drive personal vehicles called cars. Zara displayed an image of a highway. These vehicles can move at speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour on special roadways. And the safety systems? Asked a student from a highly technological aquatic world. Force fields? Automated guidance? Well, most modern cars have some driver assistance, but generally humans control them manually using visual information and physical controls. The xenobiologist actually dropped his data tablet. You navigate high-velocity metal projectiles using only your limited biological senses? It sounds worse than it is, Zara assured him, though the room's collective anxiety suggested her classmates disagreed. Traffic accidents are relatively rare considering how many vehicles are in operation. Define relatively rare, demanded Professor Narlax. Thousands of incidents daily across our planet, but considering there are billions of humans. She decided to move on quickly. Weather can sometimes create challenging conditions. For instance, thunderstorms produce lightning, essentially massive electrical discharges from the atmosphere. The image she displayed of a lightning strike against a city skyline caused Velen's gaseous form to contract defensively in his suit. These electrical atmospheric events occur near your dwellings? Regularly? He bubbled in alarm. Well, they're seasonal in most regions, but yes. And your protective measures? Planetary shields? Weather control technology? We basically just stay indoors and wait for them to pass, Zara admitted. Though tall buildings have lightning rods to direct strikes safely to the ground. The professor's mandibles clicked rapidly. Student Novak, are you suggesting that your species' response to massive atmospheric energy discharges is to install metal attractants on your dwellings? Put that way, it did sound rather insane. It's effective, though. She moved on to discussing food preparation, displaying images of a typical kitchen with a stove and oven. Most humans prepare food by applying heat, sometimes open flame, to make it more digestible and flavorful. You intentionally set fire to your nutritional sources. The fungoid student spores puffed in distress. Inside your living structures? In controlled conditions, Zara clarified. We've developed very specific tools for safely containing fire for cooking purposes. Your species has domesticated combustion, the xenobiologist murmured in disbelief. Professor Narlax raised an appendage. Student Novak, let me ensure I understand correctly. Humans regularly subject themselves to traffic dangers, atmospheric electrical discharges, and control fire as part of normal daily activities. Yes, that's correct. Though you're making it sound much more dramatic than it feels to us. I assure you, the professor replied, I am making a considerable effort to understate my reaction. He turned to his colleague. It appears the Class-12 Deathworld classification for Earth was, if anything, conservative. The xenobiologist nodded gravely. The physiological and psychological adaptations required for their species to consider these conditions normal are remarkable. Zara hadn't even gotten to her section on human recreation yet, and already the class looked like they might need therapy. Perhaps she should have gone with a more sanitized version of life on Earth after all. Now let's discuss what humans do for entertainment and relaxation, Zara continued, displaying images of various recreational activities. After work or education, many humans engage in physical activities for pleasure. Is physical exertion as recreation? Asked a low-gravity species student whose movements were always carefully calculated to conserve energy. Why would you deplete your resources voluntarily? Exercise actually makes humans stronger over time, Zara explained. Our muscles adapt to regular use by becoming more efficient. Plus, it triggers the release of chemicals in our brains that make us feel good. You experience pleasure from muscular microtrauma? The xenobiologist was scribbling notes so rapidly his stylus began to smoke slightly. When you put it that way, it sounds weird, but yes. Let me show you some common human sports. She displayed a series of images, a soccer match, basketball game, and marathon runners. Many human recreational activities involve competing to move objects according to specific rules, often while preventing opponents from doing the same. This soccer example shows humans using only their lower limbs to maneuver a ball into a targeted net, deliberately limiting functional appendage use to increase difficulty, Professor Narlax observed. It's fascinating artificial constraint. This next one shows a different approach, Zara continued, pointing to the basketball image. Here, humans jump into the air to place a ball through an elevated target. They leave the safety of the ground voluntarily? Asked a student whose gravitationally sensitive species never lost contact with the surface. All the time. In fact, some human sports are specifically about going as high as possible, like pole vaulting or high jump. The image changed to show Olympic high jumpers clearing a bar. This is a competitive activity where humans propel themselves over increasingly elevated obstacles until only one competitor can continue. The classroom erupted into chittering, bubbling, and harmonic vibrations as students discussed this revelation among themselves. Not extreme enough? Zara said with growing confidence, realizing her presentation was finally capturing their interest. Some humans climb sheer rock faces for entertainment. She displayed an image of free climbers on El Capitan. Kipti's crystalline structure darkened in distress. They ascend mineral formations without protective equipment. but a fall would shatter their calcium-based endoskeletons. Some do use safety equipment, Zara clarified. But yes, there's an entire subset of climbing called free soloing, where humans climb without any protection at all. Is this some form of ritualized suicide? Asked Professor Narlax, genuinely confused. Not at all. It's about the challenge and the experience of focusing completely on the present moment. Velon's gaseous form had shifted to a pale blue of disbelief. Do all humans engage in such high-risk activities? No, we have plenty of less extreme options too. Many humans enjoy swimming for recreation. The image changed to show people at a beach, splashing in ocean waves. You submerge yourselves in unprocessed planetary water? The fungoid student's spores puffed in alarm. Containing microorganisms? Minerals? Particulates? That's part of the appeal, actually. Natural bodies of water feel different from treated pools. And these waves? Professor Narlax indicated the surf. They appear to be applying considerable force. Oh yes, some humans specifically seek out large waves to ride using specialized boards. It's called surfing. The xenobiologist was practically vibrating with scientific excitement. They deliberately position themselves to be propelled by chaotic hydrodynamic forces? For pleasure? Exactly. And winter sports are even more fun, Zara continued, displaying images of skiing and snowboarding. When parts of Earth become covered in frozen precipitation, humans strap devices to their feet and slide down mountains at high speeds. The classroom had grown so quiet that Zara could hear the subtle hum of the environmental systems. Student Novak, Professor Narlax finally said, "Are you suggesting that when your planet's surface becomes covered with a low-friction solid state of water, making movement treacherous, humans intentionally seek out the steepest terrain to descend at maximum velocity?" Well, yes. It's really fun, Zara replied with a shrug. Though I personally prefer snowboarding to skiing. You've participated in this activity? The professor asked incredulously. Since I was 5 years old. The statement caused such a commotion that Professor Narlax had to activate the classroom's calming field, which emitted subtle frequencies that had a soothing effect on most species' nervous systems. Once order was restored, Zara decided to conclude the recreation section with one final topic. I should also mention human culinary recreation. Many humans seek out food specifically designed to create intense sensory experiences. For instance, spicy food contains chemicals that trigger pain receptors. You intentionally consume substances that cause pain? Velon's containment suit quivered. The pain triggers endorphin release, which many humans find pleasurable. Foods like hot peppers contain capsaicin, which creates a burning sensation. A horrifying thought seemed to occur to Kipti. You ignite your internal organs for entertainment? No, it just feels like burning. It's actually perfectly safe for most humans. This distinction appeared lost on her audience. Velon's gaseous form began to spin rapidly within his containment suit, the equivalent of hyperventilation, before he abruptly condensed into a dense blob at the bottom of the suit, having apparently fainted. As the classroom's medical systems activated to attend to Velon, Professor Narlax declared a brief emergency recess. Zara hadn't even reached her conclusion yet, but she was beginning to understand that what constituted normal on Earth was nothing short of nightmarish to her classmates. When class reconvened after Velon had been stabilized, apparently the concept of voluntary pain consumption had temporarily disrupted his gaseous coherence. Zara stood before a significantly more subdued audience. Several students had activated personal protective fields, despite the fact that Zara posed no immediate threat. To summarize, she said, trying to sound casual, a typical day on Earth involves managing variable environmental conditions, navigating potential hazards like traffic and weather, consuming a variety of processed nutrients, sometimes including mild toxins for pleasure, and engaging in recreational activities that often involve physical exertion or calculated risk. The silence that followed was profound. Questions? Zara offered. Tentatively, Kipti's crystalline form chimed softly. Do humans experience fear? The question caught Zara off guard. Of course we do. Then why? Kipti's harmonics wavered. Why would you choose to live under such conditions when technology could mitigate these dangers? It was a good question. Why did humans continue to live with storms and traffic and steep mountains when they could theoretically create safer environments? I think, Zara replied thoughtfully, that humans are adaptable by nature. The conditions that seem extreme to you are simply the environment we evolved to handle. Our physiology and psychology are designed for a certain level of stress and challenge. When life gets too easy, many humans actually seek out difficulty. Professor Narlax's mandibles clicked, and what Zara had learned was his equivalent of a contemplative expression. A species that requires stress to function optimally. This explains much about human history and behavior. The professor turned to address the class. Students, we have been granted a rare opportunity today. Student Novak's presentation has demonstrated why Earth's designation as a Class-12 Deathworld is not merely a matter of environmental conditions, but a recognition of the remarkable adaptations its dominant species has developed. He turned back to Zara. Your species has not merely survived a hostile environment, you have developed a symbiotic relationship with danger itself. Rather than engineering your world to eliminate threats, you have engineered yourselves culturally, and perhaps biologically, to thrive upon challenge. I never thought of it that way, Zara admitted. To us, it's just life. And that, the professor declared, is precisely what makes your perspective so valuable to our understanding of adaptive intelligence. You have earned the highest marks for this presentation, Student Novak. As the presentation hall's systems reset for the next student, Zara found herself surrounded by classmates bombarding her with questions. Is it true humans can survive the total failure of major organs? Do you really expose your dermis to ultraviolet radiation intentionally? Can you teach me this spicy food tolerance technique? Velon, fully regasified, hovered nearby. I must apologize for my earlier reaction. The concept of recreational pain was difficult to process. Don't worry about it, Zara assured him. If it helps, I get queasy thinking about how you feed by absorbing methane through your entire body. His gaseous form rippled in what she recognized as laughter. Perhaps all species find other evolutionary paths strange. As they exited the presentation hall, Professor Narlax approached with his xenobiologist colleague. Student Novak, the Academy's exobiology department is most interested in establishing a comprehensive study program focused on Earth conditions and human adaptations. Your homeworld represents a unique opportunity for advanced survival training. You want to use Earth as some kind of extreme boot camp for students? Zara couldn't help laughing. Precisely, the professor confirmed, entirely serious. Controlled exposure to Earth conditions could prepare Confederation species for adaptation to circumstances previously considered unsurvivable. Would you be willing to serve as a consultant for such a program? Zara thought about her homesick moments over the past few months, how she sometimes missed thunderstorms and spicy food, and the simple pleasure of swimming in a natural lake. I'd be happy to help, Professor. Though I should warn you, I was considering spending my next break mountain climbing in the Himalayas. That might be an advanced course, even by human standards. The xenobiologist's recording device actually short-circuited at this statement. As she walked away with Kipti and Velon, her friends bombarded her with questions about these Himalayas and why anyone would want to climb them. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Zara didn't feel like a curiosity or an oddity. She felt like an ambassador for her species and planet. A planet that, she was beginning to realize, had prepared her for adaptation to any challenge the galaxy might present. After all, compared to rush-hour traffic in the rain while running late, and not having had your morning coffee, interstellar diplomacy was a breeze.